Would you believe the character of Ra's al Ghul turns 55 this year? That anniversary, paired with a YouTube comment from Jason Hendrick 8357, means we get an earlier look at how I made my BTAS Ra's al Ghul in his standard green suit and cape look. Apologies to the wonderful guy, as the Booster Gold and Green Lantern video will now be up much later than planned. You may or may not have heard, but I had a hard drive data issue and lost a ton of my stuff. I tried recovering it through a professional service, but now I'm going through a second one. I lost footage for about 50 to 60 different customs from the last 2 years, and I'm still trying to figure things out and remake my video assets, so it's been slow to get back up and running. Now, on to this month's video. I already mentioned Ra's, and at the time of publishing, the other custom will be given to someone heavily involved in BTAS tomorrow. But more on that in a bit. I'll be pairing the demon's head with his son seen in the episode Showdown, Arkady Duvall. Now, who should go first? Since Ra's was made a few years ago, let's check him out first. Like most, I was pretty surprised when DC Collectibles revealed their Ra's al Ghul figure because he wasn't in his typical look. I do really appreciate the one they gave us, but I just had to have the green suit and cape combo on my shelf too. You might think the Ra's figure would make a good base, but we'll only be using his head. For the body, I was inspired by the incomparable Zelu 1984's custom and followed suit, using a BTAS Riddler body for him. His cape was a tough one at first, but again, Zelu came through with the incredible idea to use a foam sheet from your local craft store. I got mine at Michael's. Alright, let's get going. You might think that since the Riddler has a green suit already, we're halfway there, right? Not quite. Nigma has a much wider tie than Ra's, and he's missing your standard looking shirt collar. Because of that, I'll heat up and remove his arms and jacket, and then Dremel off the sides of his tie to thin it down. The last little trick from Zelu came from the idea that he really doesn't need his arms underneath that cape, plus it'll be easier to shape the foam and help his silhouette look better, so we won't be putting those back onto him. Break out your epoxy, mix them up, and start by reshaping his tie. Since you won't see the whole thing, we can just do what they did with the paint and smear the end down so it fits underneath his jacket. Let that dry and move down to his pants. Here I'd like to add little hem and cuff details to thicken the pants up a bit since Riddler's legs are so thin. Ra's has much wider pants, so we'll want to reflect that. Come back up to his torso and Dremel down any thickness of his tie before adding his shirt collar shapes on top of the knot. This is obviously different footage, but it's the same idea. Those are really all the mods he needs before making his cape, but that will be after we paint him. Ra's main colors are red, black, green, and white, and then an eventual yellow for the trim and chain of his cape. After priming with dull coat, I'll start with his white shirt since that's the bottommost layer. A few coats of white later and we can paint his red tie on. Next will be his green suit and pants, but don't forget his black shoes. His collar presented a minor problem, but I always planned on using the Mad Hatter's collar because it was pretty similar. You could probably sculpt it on instead, especially with green stuff, but I made him about 6 years ago and I relied more on actual parts whenever I could. As I mentioned in the recipe section, I cut the cape out of a craft foam sheet. So as not to waste any of it, I like to make a paper prototype first, make all the necessary refinements, and then transfer it to the final material. I eventually covered the ends of the shoulders with epoxy and Dremeled over it and sanded it smooth. Paint it all green and then get some painter's tape to mask the edge trim that will end up going yellow. The final touches for him are his gold clasps and chain on the front of his cape. For these, I believe I cut and glued some sort of rubber cord onto the cape and then covered the ends with epoxy circles. Once they're dry, paint them yellow and you're all done. What an awesome addition to the BTAS Rogues and an essential look for one of Batman's most unique rivals. Now let's see how I made his son. For Mr. Duval, I went through a few optional parts. First, I had to decide if I wanted to make him all buttoned up from his look for most of the episode, or if I wanted him in his end fight swashbuckling look. Would you be surprised if I told you I decided on both? You see, I'll be making Ra's in his top hat look to go with him, but I didn't want them to look too twinsy, so I'm making his more casual look for the shelf. But not for today's look. Today I'm making his buttoned up look to gift to a man who was incredibly influential on the original BTAS run. While the Ra's we just made didn't use the original DCC body, his son will. Since I'm making him in his coat, the Gods and Monsters Superman coat will donate rather nice and form-fittingly to give the right look. His pants will require a little bit of extra sculpting since Raish has the high boots, but they should work. His arms could probably work to sculpt the coat sleeves on top of, but I'm going to swap the Raish forearms out for some spare Mad Hatter ones as a base instead, and then pair them with some gloved TNBA Joker fists. Now, whose head looks like Arkady? He's rather unique in his design, so I can't think of a super close match, but I think I'll try the Gods and Monsters Kirk Langstrom on him. Alright, let's get moving on to his modifications. I'll start the mods with some dremeling on his chest to clear out the open V-neck and smooth things out. Superman's coat shoulder pads need to go, and that's really the only dremeling needed on his body, so I'll switch to the epoxy additions. I started on that same chest area to finish smoothing it out so it can form the basis for his button-down shirt. Next, I'll sculpt over Hatter's cuffs and thicken up the forearms to help produce the lanky look. Come down to his legs and thicken those up so they look more like baggier slacks instead of the tights that Raish wears. Dremel the chest smooth before starting to form his vest around his neck and then down on his torso. I'll switch to green stuff for the bottom of his vest to keep it flexible so we can maintain a little waist articulation. Coming up to his head, I'll test the mustache on the Kirk head to see if it'll work. I'm only using green stuff here because I had some left over from his vest just now. Otherwise I probably would have just used epoxy. While all that cures, I'll go back down to his legs and get another layer onto his pants. I'll add a wrinkle at the bottom for a little detail by rolling a thin piece of epoxy and smearing it in the top and bottom connections. You can smooth that out with both a little bit of water now and then your low setting on your Dremel after it cures. For the final detail on the pants, I'll add a hemmed cuff and then Dremel it flatter afterwards. Back up to his head, I'll add his connecting bit of mustache up and around to his hair, and then look at hats. I was tossing around the idea of using one of the Riddler hats, but neither seemed like the right size. I even tried cutting a similar connecting shape into his head for the hat, but it only confirmed that both hats were too small. Instead, I ended up sculpting my own using green stuff on the rim and epoxy for the main taller part. The last details on his chest are his pocket watch chain on his vest and his Texas tie-like thing below his shirt collar. Okay, let's put his coat on, prime him with some dull coat, and then move into painting. On the surface, Arkady is simply black and white with a touch of yellow, but he's subtly more detailed than that. I'll start with his off-white linen shirt, and then layer up with his dark gray vest and pants, black coat and sleeves, yellow chain, and then his peach neck and wrists, and dark gray gloves. For his head, the cast white head does me the favor of filling in his eye whites, and then I'll use a paint pen marker for his eyes and expression details. Black hat with gray band and black hair, and that nearly wraps him up. Last thing is that signature red-orange burn mark on his cheek. This Arcady Duvall gift idea came from listening to the wonderful DCAU Review podcast. If you haven't heard of it, Cal and Liam are two brothers who really love the DCAU and go through each episode reviewing it in 4 categories and give a final score. They're super fun to listen to and are great guys to boot. So they were reviewing the episode Showdown and had on legendary director of the episode Kevin Altieri, where he mentioned that Bruce Timm's Arcady Duval character design was basically his favorite in the whole series. On a previous episode with Kevin, he also mentioned how he's a big figure collector, so I thought, why not make his favorite design in 3D form? Hopefully he likes it, and I'll find out tomorrow. Dan Reba and Paul Dini will also be at the convention and receiving gifts, so I'll see if I can record things and put all of the reactions in a future video covering their custom figures too. Next month's video, however, is a little up in the air as I'm still awaiting confirmation on my lost footage. Thanks for tuning in today, and go explore my catalog of shorts and videos after this. My Instagram link is in the description if you want to see even more customs and some neat photos of them. Feel free to like and subscribe to get notified for everything, and then hit the hype button down below if you'd like to help me grow. Have a good one, and happy customizing.